Okay, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is centered on a really foundational text from, well, one of the 20th century's most talked about religious movements. We're digging into a pretty dense March 1975 address by Sun Myung Moon, the founder of the Unification Church. It's titled The Mission We Are Undertaking.
Yeah, and this isn't exactly light reading, is it? What we have here is basically a blueprint, a really radical philosophy about personal responsibility, organizational drive.
Hmm.
It's all defined by absolute commitment, incredible speed, and what you can only really call aggressive goal setting.
Aggressive is maybe an understatement.
Maybe, yeah. So for you listening, our mission today is to kind of understand how this text connects a person's success in life directly to this huge, global, confrontational, almost militaristic divine plan.
Absolutely. And the whole thing kicks off with this idea that responsibility, it's not just nice to have, it's the absolute core of a meaningful life.
Right. The text basically says if you don't have a mission, doesn't matter if it's family, society, or the world,
Mm.
your life is, well, fundamentally meaningless within this specific framework.
Okay, so section 1 then. The threshold of success. We're talking 100% and beyond.
Exactly. The core teaching is simple.
Yeah.
Everyone has a mission.
Yeah.
And your success, it hangs completely on how well you prepare and how perfectly you execute. But the standards here are way beyond your typical management seminar.
Yeah, that leads to these really specific criteria they use for judging work.
Mm.
The speech is adamant that people don't just look at results, horizontally, like what did you achieve right now?
Mm-hmm.
They judge it vertically.
And that vertical view is crucial.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you're doing right now, it's like a snapshot. It reflects all your past preparation. It determines where you stand now. And crucially, it predicts whether you have a bright future or not. Your work isn't just a task done. It's a projection of your whole destiny.
Okay, and here's where it gets, really intense for me. The author insists there's this vast difference, that's the quote, between getting 99% of your goal done and hitting 100% or even more. I mean, logically, 99% is almost perfect.
Not in this worldview, that 1% gap. It's everything. It's existential.
Existential? How so?
Well, the text states, pretty bluntly, that those who achieve even 1% less than the target, they just fade away. History won't remember them. But the ones who hit 100% plus that extra 1%, the overachievers, they flourish and thrive.
Wow, it's a very binary outlook.
Completely. And they use that Olympic Games analogy, which
Yeah.
actually makes it pretty clear. Break a record by a tiny fraction of a second, win by a hair. You're the champion. You're the record holder. You're remembered. That tiny, tiny margin makes all the difference.
So it's not just about being good, it's about being definitively the best, even if just barely.
Exactly. And what really stands out is that this isn't just about being efficient. It's framed as a moral issue. If you can give 100%, but you only deliver 99%, you've actually failed the mission morally. That last 1% apparently is the hardest part. And all the value lies in proving you play. You can consistently make that leap beyond just the minimum requirement.
So it's the difference between just doing your job and fulfilling a divine imperative.
Precisely. Doing what's required versus doing what's necessary for this grand mission.
Okay, so if that last 1% is the difference between being forgotten and being, a historical victor, how do you actually get people to push beyond that 99%? The text has some thoughts on that, right?
Oh, definitely. The author argues that hitting 90%, even 99%, that's relatively common. People can often get close. But that final crucial push, that usually requires some kind of external force, pressure.
So this is where things like exams come in.
Exactly. It's a direct argument against just letting people be,
Yeah.
against a more relaxed, liberal approach you might see in education or management. The text explicitly says examinations are needed because they force students to really strive hard.
Right.
The logic is simple. If a school wants top-tier, high-level students, it must give more exams and harder exams. The pressure itself is what forges the excellence.
And this isn't just for school, right? It applies to the organization, to life in general within the movement.
Absolutely. It extends right into organizational life.
Mhm.
The text argues you can't avoid supervision. You actually need someone in charge to, and I quote, drive you harshly, nag all the time, and even poke you from the side.
Wow, poke you from the side.
Yeah, literally. And it's all framed as necessary to overcome what they see as natural human laziness.
But what's really fascinating, or maybe disturbing depending on your view, is how they spin this. How should the person being pushed feel about it?
That's the twist. The followers shouldn't complain about this toughness. They should actually be grateful.
Grateful for being nagged and driven harshly.
Yes. The interpretation given is that this relentless pressure is actually proof. Proof that the leader genuinely wants that individual to succeed, to become a victor, and maybe even eventually surpass the leader themselves, to lead or dominate.
So the pressure isn't punishment, it's an investment, a sign of belief in your potential.
That's exactly the framing. And they use this really striking contrast.
Yeah.
Compare someone who asks their parents, hey, could you wake me up earlier tomorrow so I can get more done? Versus someone who hates being woken up.
Okay.
The text predicts the one who seeks that difficulty, that pain of waking early, they're destined for vastly greater things. They'll eventually lead their own parents even. It turns obedience and struggle into a mark of ambition.
So it completely reframes hardship as the necessary path to that 100% plus success, which, as we've established, is the only kind that counts in this system.
You got it. It justifies constant, maximum effort, no slacking allowed.
Okay, so taking that idea of constant pressure, scaling it up now, from the individual to the national level, this leads to some pretty controversial political ideas, doesn't it?
It really does. The text asks, what happens if a nation's leader is just, nonchalant? If they let citizens just go any way you choose?
And the answer is?
That country is doomed to decline. The clear implication is that loose, decentralized, permissive leadership inevitably leads to national failure.
Which then logically leads to the idea that you need a strong hand at the wheel.
Exactly. It leads directly to this controversial ideal of the necessary strongman. The text is careful. It avoids the actual word dictator, but it argues that a ruler who successfully takes control pushes the population quickly towards a single vital goal. That person will be remembered as the greatest leader.
So strong control is justified if the goal is important enough and needs to be reached fast.
That's the argument. And they use a specific and definitely politically charged example from the time, President Nixon.
Nixon. How does he fit in?
He's actually referred to as a great man in this text. Why? Because according to the author, he had the conviction of how to drive the nation. The text argues that in that specific sense, his willingness to push the country towards a goal, even with opposition, he was actually greater than other presidents.
Wow, okay. That's a take. And connecting this back to the Cold War context of 1975, the source draws a really stark contrast, doesn't it, between the democratic world, particularly the U.S., and the communist world?
Extremely stark. Almost apocalyptic. The author predicts quite confidently that the communist side will inevitably win.
Why? What's the reasoning?
Because, the text argues, they operate with clear, unified goals. They have this profound attitude where they'd rather die than not achieve their objective, total commitment.
And the democratic side, the U.S.
Characterized as lacking a clear goal to actually defeat communism. Too much laxness, too much internal division, political decentralization, all of which the text predicts will lead to failure. The U.S. is projected to be swallowed up.
Swallowed up. How does it explain the mechanism? Is it just military conquest?
It's actually more specific, more political than just invasion. The source outlines a very particular prediction about communist strategy. It focuses on exploiting the decentralized nature of American politics. The tension between state laws and federal law.
Okay, how would that work?
They predict that communists will infiltrate certain key states, let's say 3 or 4 influential ones. They'll influence the state legislatures, get them to unite against the president, maybe using a slogan like, let every state be independent.
Using states' rights rhetoric to fracture the country from within.
Exactly. That very political structure designed to protect freedom is identified as the key vulnerability, a way to shatter national unity.
Okay, so given this view of an existential threat and a coming collapse, the movement defines its own purpose, God's purpose, in very urgent, very aggressive terms.
Extremely aggressive. The mission, as stated, is twofold. Save the world and annihilate all the opposing powers. We're moving way beyond just personal achievement now, into actively removing any and all obstacles.
And this leads to some really specific targets for, the word used is extermination.
Yeah, and it's used explicitly, covering both physical and spiritual dimensions. The address says, point blank, if hippies are obstacles to God's mission, they must be exterminated.
Wow.
If free sex is seen as harming the world, then that whole idea, that way of life, must be exterminated. These aren't vague enemies. There are specific social and cultural elements targeted for removal.
But then it gets even more radical, critiquing the very foundations of the society it's in.
That's probably the most shocking part. The text argues that if the ideology of freedom itself gets in the way of striving hard against enemies, then the idea of freedom has to be annihilated.
Annihilate freedom.
The claim is that too much unfocused freedom has been destroying the nation bit by bit. The mission comes before liberty. It's a direct challenge.
And this aggressive stance, it carries over into views on military power too, right?
Directly. The author just dismisses churches that preach relying only on God for protection while the enemy is building up weapons. That's seen as naive, misguided.
So what's the alternative?
They make this really controversial claim that God actually had his people make atomic bombs, precisely because the enemy was arming.
So the followers are told to actively support military buildup.
Yes, commanded to advocate for manufacturing heavy armaments. The logic is presented as defensive, but it's absolute. Build up your strength, make your army powerful, and just wait. Don't declare war, just be strong.
The idea being deterrence.
Exactly. The enemy will find you stronger than they are, and then they cannot attack you. Peace through overwhelming strength initiated by you.
So pulling this section together, the mission is huge.
It's massive. The text sums it up as a three-part goal. 1, shatter communism completely. 2, annihilate Satan and all his devils, down to the very last one. And 3, swallow up or exterminate any evil groups or ideologies that stand in the way. Physical level, spiritual level. It's total war against opposition in any form.
Total war. So to achieve something that immense against enemies both political and spiritual, the strategy has to be pretty extreme too. What's the core approach?
Urgency, velocity, speed. The core belief is that the only way to stop enemies, like the communists or even established churches that might oppose them, from getting organized and fighting back effectively, is to move too fast. Too fast for them to even react properly.
Outrun the opposition.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that urgency dictates an incredible level of personal dedication, particularly around something as basic as rest.
The sleep thing.
Yeah. The author literally questions who decided humans need 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
Calls that person ignorant of God's providence, or maybe even the son of evil.
That's quite a condemnation of sleeping in.
It is. The directive is crystal clear. Followers should sleep maybe 4 hours, maybe less. And you have to use every cell and every ounce of your energy, total focus. Anything less, any relaxation, is seen as giving Satan an opening to lure you away.
Wow. And it's not just individual effort, right? There's a strategy for how the group moves too.
Absolutely. Unity and speed, again. It rejects the individual path, which is called the zigzag way,
Yeah.
Meandering on your own. Instead, followers must travel by leaps and bounds, together, as a single united group. Like a bullet is the analogy used.
Why like a bullet? What's wrong with the individual path?
Because, the text argues, if you travel alone, you risk taking a circuitous route. You start thinking about your old life, old friends, your lovers, your sweethearts. Individual thoughts and connections are seen as dangerous detours, pulling you back towards failure.
Group momentum prevents backsliding.
That's the idea. And this high-speed, high-unity strategy drove their really ambitious projects back then, scaling up rapidly from events at Lincoln Center to Madison Square Garden, then aiming for Yankee Stadium.
Which was a huge goal, right? Something like 200,000 people.
Exactly. And crucially, the target was always 200,000 plus one, never minus one. It comes right back to that 100% got to beat the target threshold we talked about earlier.
And this pressure wasn't applied evenly, was it? The text singles out certain groups.
It does. Which really shows how non-negotiable this all was. It specifically highlights the Japanese members who were in New York at the time. They're referred to as the Eve Nation.
The Eve Nation, okay. And what was expected of them?
An immense, absolutely non-negotiable mission. They were tasked with setting the standard, the tradition for sacrifice and success for the whole movement.
How so? What did that mean in practical terms?
It meant they had to work demonstrably harder than the American members. They had to bring new people into meetings at a drastically higher rate. The source gives an example. Maybe they needed to bring in 3 new people a day, while others might have a target of 3 a week.
3 a day versus 3 a week, that's a massive difference in expectation.
Huge. And the consequences for not meeting these goals were presented as existential, not just, getting reassigned.
What kind of consequences?
The author states flat out that if they failed in the big Yankee Stadium campaign, the Japanese members would be kicked out of the U.S. entirely. Their history within the movement would be erased. And this failure wouldn't just affect them. It would harm Japan's entire global mission, according to this worldview.
So incredible pressure, work desperately, no relaxing, because the fate of your home nation is literally riding on your success in New York right now.
Exactly. Desperate effort was demanded.
So bringing it all together, this constant acceleration, Lincoln Center, MSG, Yankee Stadium, the Washington campaign, It was all designed to create such intense velocity.
that by the time any opposition, whether it's the FBI investigating them or established churches trying to organize against them, could figure out what was going on and react.
The movement would already have the flag of victory in our hands, as the text puts it. Speed wasn't just a strategy. It was their primary weapon against scrutiny, against organized resistance.
Yeah, move too fast to be stopped, too fast to even be properly understood.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. What does this deep dive into this 1975 address really mean for you, the listener, trying to understand this?
Well, I think it presents this incredibly demanding, all-encompassing worldview. Personal success, achieving your goals,
Yeah.
it's only considered valid, only meaningful if it directly serves this larger national victory and divine mission. And that mission requires extreme personal sacrifice, constant external and internal pressure, and just relentless speed.
And the source is remarkably upfront about the end game of that speed, isn't it? It's not just about achieving goals quickly.
No, it's explicitly stated. The ultimate goal of moving so fast is to be able to absorb the people on the evil side, their term, before those people can even grasp what's happening, before they understand what the movement truly represents.
So the speed paralyzes opposition and facilitates assimilation.
That's the strategic aim, yeah. This whole philosophy we've unpacked today rejects compromise, it rejects patience, it favors total dominance achieved through sheer overwhelming velocity.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe something for you to chew on. If the success of a movement, any movement really, depends fundamentally on moving too quickly for the outside world to effectively scrutinize it or organize against it, what does that imply? What does it suggest about the long-term sustainability or even the nature of that mission once the speed inevitably has to slow down and the world finally gets a chance to catch up and take a closer look?
That's a heavy question to end on. Food for thought, definitely.